Hey everybody, we're Shayem and Chris, and this is Fan Team Radio. And we are back after a somewhat exciting Imola 2024 Grand Prix. Chris, what's up?
Hey, sorry about the delays. I was living like a caveman for a couple of days because I was in those Houston storms, but we're back. We're live. We have power finally. I got to watch the race a little bit from my caveman lifestyle, but yeah, it was exciting. Even from quality, McLaren was really showing that their upgrades mean business. I know we talked about that last episode where it was like, is this real? Is it not real? Is it track dependent? And they kind of look like Red Bull. They kind of look like they have the pace and, they have the driver pairing to do it. What are your thoughts on McLaren?
Yeah, we've gotten things wrong so many times, Chris. I've kind of learned to let things ride a little bit longer before making a definitive kind of decision on something. So let's take it back to last year, circa 2023, pretty much around the same time, or even a little bit before. McLaren was essentially the laughingstock of the grid. Compared to what their expectations were and what they delivered. They missed all their markers preseason. Zach Brown was incredibly transparent, painfully transparent about that. But it's hard to deny the complete 180 that team has taken from missing those targets, and then now they're pacing alongside Red Bull. Albeit the car this week for Red Bull had some issues that Max was able to overcome, but were probably more apparent in Checo's race. Um, the reason I bring that up, Chris, is because since then, I think going into this year, probably back in April or late March, McLaren made an announcement to switch up their leadership in terms of the technical roles. David Sanchez had came in as their technical director, essentially what the role that Andrea Stella is currently fulfilling. But after a disagreement between McLaren and David Sanchez in terms of what the expected role was, David decided to leave, leaving McLaren with, I guess, what most teams would consider a pit, and they kind of were able to galvanize and have it become an opportunity. Recently, they've taken the position of a committee approach to their leadership on the technical side, right? So with Zach Brown running the business side as a CEO, you have Andrea Stella sitting in. I believe he's still the interim team principal, although they should boost that guy up to full time. His redefinition of the car's output really has brought some stability to McLaren, but a couple other people that are helping him out. Rob Marshall, is going to stay on as their chief designer. Neil Howley is going to be going into a technical director of engineering. Peter Prodromo, he's going to continue as their technical director of Aero. And then the concept and performance side will all be taken, under Andrea Stella's kind of guidance. I assume I haven't really looked into this too much yet, Chris, but I assume Mercedes has a similar, or they're aiming for some sort of similar uh, goal for sure in terms of upgrading their cars in a quick turnaround time. But it seems almost like Mercedes is first of all hemorrhaging employees to other teams right now, while unable to fill in certain roles on the technical side that's keeping them from kind of showing similar strides of positivity that McLaren did. Do you think Mercedes would benefit from considering a similar change in their leadership and making it more of a spread across different leaders in the technical roles? Um, it seemed like it's what worked for them back in their glory days, along with you know no budget cap. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, Chris. Given McLaren's steady strides forward in a low amount of time, do you think Mercedes should consider doing something similar with their leadership, or do you think there is still something that Mercedes is missing that's keeping them from even getting to that step?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, McLaren obviously has had a lot of success in a very short period of time. We saw a little bit of brilliance of that last year, where they were able to kind of upgrade, and we all thought that they would move to the front, and then they sort of fell back a little bit. Um, and but now we're seeing the results of that. I wasn't that big of a Zach Brown believer for a while, and now I kind of am, only because all the pieces are falling together. But it's hard to tell the longevity of that success and this new team and how they've structured it. So it's difficult to say if Mercedes should build a similar thing. They've obviously have 8 years of consistent success prior to them sort of falling off a cliff. But I think, those are the ebbs and flows of any kind of sports organization. They had Lewis in his prime, they had Toto and other technical people at their prime. And, now it kind of seems it's like Red Bull's turn, McLaren's turn. But that being said, they do need to make some sort of change, right? Like something needs to change. They have bled a lot of talent. There's a lot of brain drain going on at Mercedes. And it's, I don't know whether it's something that it will be even possible while Toto is still at the home. Like he's been there so long, and he's probably set in his ways, and he's also probably used to a system that worked before, and he might not know much else. And this new style that McLaren is doing and other teams are doing, it might just not be something that he's can understand as well. But I mean, he's Toto. He's a really smart guy. He's obviously very successful. But I think he's trying to fix the pieces as they come, and it's kind of like programming, where like you could fix one problem and it cascades and other problems happen. So, but clearly they do need to make a change. So I don't, this might be one way for them to do that. It's just very difficult to tell, but they need to find something, and they're losing. We still don't know who the second driver is going to be, so it's difficult to build around that before you even know it.
Yeah, it's if you recall when James Allison rejoined the team, I thought that there was going to be a lot of, positivity coming from that and probably leading them back to their old ways and better habits. But that hasn't really matriculated or kind of come to life in the way that I was hoping it would. They've essentially lost talent that are good enough to become team principals in their own rights at other organizations. Mike Crack and uh, who's at Williams again? I'm having a brain fart.
Oh, James Vals, yeah,
James Vowles, yeah.
and
So
they've lost a lot of people.
yeah, those are just two notable ones. There's a lot of other ones that Zach Brown alluded to, and that sorry, not Zach, but Christian Horner alluded to in terms of people just leaving Mercedes and kind of an exodus, which I'd also like to dissect into and kind of understand why that's happening. I haven't read anything or really heard other podcasts that have indicated why. Maybe it's just the natural churn of F1, like you mentioned, right? It was a Mercedes kind of 8 year span of dominance, and then Red Bull again, and then now it seems like McLaren and Ferrari are ponying up to have the next battle of the over the next rules and regulation period. So I I'd like to think that if they can poach Mercedes in the course of the next year, some technical talent that could take a second look at what they currently have and what they're planning to do in 2026 and quickly identify areas of suboptimal, design or areas of change that maybe Mercedes has leaned into too much and invested in too much. And now, because it's their baby, they're unable to scrutinize it as heavily from the inside. Maybe an external person that has the technical expertise, but also can serve as objective, uh, an objective perspective. Maybe that's something that could really help them out. I think they need to go on a complete recruiting front on their technical design, engineering front, and that's besides the driver conversation that we were trying to have, right, Chris? Who is going to take in that second seat? And kind of the effect, and I don't know if this was the case all the time in F1, where there's a lot of like teams that have really strong driver pairings, where I guess the Lance Strolls of the world and Logan Sargents of the world are kind of like unable to even access, because the talent is so good. The NBA used to be like that. I think I mentioned this before in a previous podcast, but the NBA used to be a league with like, let's say like 20-25% just stacked like athletes, maybe like 50% just like really good athletes that you can count on it every other night or every other week. And then you got like people who just did not look like athletes. They're just like big dudes that were just bullies. They didn't really have any skill. They're just big, right? That was like 90s basketball, 80s basketball. Even you could track that back as far as you want. In the most recent iteration of the NBA, I'll take it from like 2010, late 2000s all the way to now. You've seen the rise of star athletes, right? Just star-studded teams, right? It started with the Boston Celtics, kind of bringing on Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Ray Allen, and then that kind of became like the trend for LeBron, for all, like all these other teams to create these super teams, eking out a lot of like talent that could have potentially played ball in the 90s, but now just can't because the landscape of the talent and in the league has that changed. I say all that to kind of say maybe F1 is now taking a similar turn where you have driver pairings that are incredibly stacked, right? Like your Ferraris with Lewis and Charles. If if Red Bull decides to sign Carlos, you'll have Carlos and Max. In McLaren you have Lando and Oscar. And Mercedes, you could potentially have George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. Like these are just going to be like, and then you have your Ollie Behrman coming in into Haas, so that's gonna and this is assuming that these young guys perform the way that they've indicated, given a small amount of test runs.
Yeah.
Liam Lawson could come in, right, a boost up the profile for VCarb by taking Danny Rick out. Yuki is, you can see, we'll get to Yuki here in a sec, but you can see year over year he's getting better. So what I'm trying to say is the stable of talent is like really, I feel like notching up. It's definitely pushing all the best of the best, the cream of the crop, to these big teams. But it's also these like middle of the pack teams that are starting to take on like really great driver pairings. I say all that to answer your question. What should Mercedes do about this D2 situation? I think they should have a sense of conviction in going forward with Kimi Antonelli. Give him some time at Williams by taking out Logan Sargent now. Just take the rip the band-aid off. Let him have the second half of this season to practice. And Williams isn't going anywhere, unfortunately, this week, and we'll talk about more about them later on. But I think bringing in Kimi Antonelli will keep Toto from feeling that sense of dread that he probably did after losing Max at a young age. It would probably promote their ability to bring in up and coming technical talent from other teams and say, hey, we're starting a new project. Essentially, the story that McLaren, kind of uh, gave to the world, right? Like, it's a storied organization. They have the resources. They have a very good leader who might be spread thin. Quite honestly, is what I'm thinking. I think Toto is the owner of, or majority owner of that team, which is different than the stake that these other guys have in their respective teams. So that's kind of where I'm thinking that this conversation should go for Mercedes is let's get Kimi Antonelli, let's get him some time in a Williams, make sure we validate and vet him properly. He has some time in a low risk setting to really do well. Williams doesn't have anything to lose. And then when next year comes around, you can set it to where you have him go slot into Mercedes and have Valtteri slot back into Williams. Williams needs a good stopgap right now, so I think like they don't have the luxury of being like, let's go find a young driver and curate him into something. I think they have to kind of go by necessity of their parent company in certain ways with Mercedes. So that's what I'm thinking is going to shake out. How do you feel? How do you feel about the D2 position for Mercedes? What do you think is going to be the right course of action for them to take?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think uh, Kimmy is probably their best option. Like you could put Carlos in the seat, but even though he's doing really well and he's kind of in his prime, they really need to look to the future. They need someone in that seat who can spend years there, develop with the car, and not be approaching the end of their career in a few years. And Kimmy's like the perfect person to do that. And then if Kimmy doesn't pan out, then you could find someone who's established, someone who's good from another team, whatever you need to do. So he's probably what's going to happen. And I agree that someone like Valtteri should, be the replacement for Logan or whoever, what other seats open up at Williams. Well, I guess Albon has already kind of signed his contract, but just because they need to develop the team, they need to develop the car. And so having someone that has the experience, the knowledge, especially the knowledge with Mercedes engines, the time that he had at Mercedes. So I think that's a perfect shakeout and what will likely happen. It would just be really interesting if uh, Kimmy takes over for Logan mid-season and then also gets signed to the Mercedes seat. He's like driving into Williams while confirmed in Mercedes. That would be really interesting.
Well, it's not too dissimilar from how Red Bull uses V carb. So
100%. Yeah. No, it's totally understandable. And I definitely think that's what might happen. I think Logan is obviously under the gun and he's been almost, I think last week, James basically made a public statement that alludes to.
yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, things like that are a little bit harsh, but, that's the sport and this is F1. Uh, and,
He's been given a long enough leash. I feel like James Val might be one of the most patient men on that grid,
100%.
regardless of position.
Oh, listen, Logan would destroy me in a car, but he's had long enough to with no improvement,
But
and
he'll also destroy the car in a car.
he would. Well, that's true. Maybe I would beat him because I could probably finish because I wouldn't be going
Yeah.
fast enough to go off track. Yeah, but no, like circling back to just the whole Mercedes thing in a nutshell, we. I think last episode, maybe it was another one before that, you talked a little bit about how valuable the people at Mercedes are. And there's so many people that spent so long in that
I was
organization.
talking about Red Bull right now. Yeah, they're assets right now.
Yeah, their
Everyone at
assets.
Red Bull.
That happened at Mercedes. Like, if you spent 8 years at the best team in the world and then they start slipping up, you are so valuable to the rest of the organizations with F1 because you know what it took to create that winning team. You know what it took on the engineering side, the organization side, the workflow, how you guys operated as a team. And so it's totally understandable the second the championships start falling off that they're getting poached left and right because people want that insider knowledge. They want to know how to make that winning team. And so I think it's going to be difficult for Mercedes to pick up the pieces because ultimately there are, we've seen Kick, Sauber, Green, Neon teams, pit crew. There's only so many people in the world who can be at the top of their game. And so, it's probably going to take a little bit of Toto's like instincts to go find some younger up and coming talent who will change the game. But ultimately, it's going to be a 2026 race to who makes the best engine, who makes, that new car. And that could be Mercedes all over again. We'll see. But for now, they need to focus on the problem at hand, get that D2 driver in place, and, worry about the rest later. Adrian Newey's leveling the
Do
playing
you,
field a little bit by
do you
leaving.
think how long do you think that Mercedes turnaround time is going to be anywhere near McLaren's
I mean,
this time next year?
yeah, well, no, I mean, no. I say that for a reason because I actually don't think that they care. I I don't think that they I think that they want to focus on 2026 why redevelop the whole? I mean, obviously, if it's an easy solution, but they've been trying to fix this car for 2 years now, and I don't think they're going to spend all this time, energy, effort, and dollars and reinventing the wheel for one more season that Red Bull's probably going to dominate anyways. I think that they would rather spend their dollars and energy and in brain talent on making sure that they nail the regs in 2026. So I think they'll probably take next year as another L, get Kimmy up to speed, get him used to the team, get him used to the car, get him used to feedback and him being able to tell the team what he needs in an F1 car, and then hopefully nail it for 2026. So that's I mean, listen, Mercedes is not number two anymore. They're not even number three anymore. They're behind McLaren and Ferrari and Red Bull. Mercedes went from being the best team on the planet to being the fourth best team on the planet overnight. And so they have too much to fix to try to make up that gap in a single year. And I think that's just the reality of it.
No, it's a fair take. I think any semblance of really striving left with Lewis's announcement because that was the only thing that was kind of holding their feet to the fire in terms of timeline and expediting that timeline for success is can we get another chip for Lewis, you know? And now that that's kind of off the table, their priorities have to change to kind of accommodate for what's at hand right now. And I think, yeah, even though finding the next driver is important, back to my point, I think it's just as important to concurrently go find talent for the technical department and really make sure that they you know coalesce and gel together in a way that Toto can leave, kind of take their suggestions to heart as opposed to recreating the same thing that happened when Lewis suggested that they change up the car and they kind of just went with their laurels. So, yeah, I think we kind of established where we think Mercedes is at, especially in comparisons to McLaren's upward trajectory. Good job, McLaren. Let's talk about Yuki Tsunoda, Chris. There's some reports that are out there that I'll let you talk about a little bit at length, but let's kind of break down his weekend. So he had an outstanding qualifying, slotted in at P7, which is a bit above, actually two positions above Danny Rick. So both V carbs were pretty great in qualifying. Yuki stayed within the realm of impressiveness by snagging some points at P10. Both Haas's kind of split them, and then Danny Rick came in at P13. So not the best race from Danny Rick. But Yuki again consistently bringing in points with the V carb car that is more or less right behind the Aston Martin in terms of pure pace. Um, it, it's it's something that I want to continue to monitor. Right back to my point earlier about us kind of just like taking it a race at a time, and over a course of time, we'll be able to decide what's going to happen with this driver or with this team. So I'm still going to monitor it because I think this is his most impressive season to date. But he's still not being considered a serious driver within the Red Bull family, at least the parent team. Um, and and I think there's good reason for him to consider other options, right, that are available to him, especially having that Japanese um, market kind of behind him as well. I think he'd be an asset to a lot of these midfield teams. I'm thinking something to the effect of Aston Martin would be perfect. We talked about this before, right?
Right.
But I know that you have some other things that you're reading out there. So what is it that you're seeing out there as a potential landing spot for Yuki?
I mean, right now there's tons of rumors out in the world just from the sake of silly season upon us, and this driver market's crazy. But there was an article came out that basically said that Yuki is fed up with Red Bull not wanting to promote him and not even having any interest or discussions. Like, no, let's talk about it. Let's see what you want. Let's see what's there. It's just you are where you are, and obviously that's probably due to the Honda interest, and they want that Japanese driver. But Red Bull's like, hey, that's you're here for that, and that's why. So I think Yuki would like to try to do, what Danny did back in the day is go find somewhere where he can be a leader, be the D1 driver, or have potential to be in a different, like, when you're at VCarb that they're not going to win the championship. You know that. But if you're at a different
Mhm.
team, even a midfield team, you know that like they could randomly nail the regs, pull a Braun GP and just win a WDC out of nowhere. So you kind of want to put yourself in that position to be at a different team, be the lead driver. And, there's rumors out there that he's interested in Haas. Obviously, there's potential for him to end up at Aston Martin if Lance Stroll finally gets out of F1 just because of the Honda connection coming over to there. So, again, there's only so many seats in this sport and there's only so many opportunities, but it sounds like there's going to be a lot of shuffling. So I think if Yuki as a driver is going to be marketable in any way, he'll take another opportunity if that comes across his path. That's just kind of what I'm seeing out there.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of options for him to step forward. A lot of them seems like side steps. I think Haas at this point compared to VCarb would be a sidestep,
Right.
and it might be even a little bit more limiting since they're quote unquote the feeder team that kind of goes into Ferrari in a less structured sense than VCarb and Red Bull, and even more so than Williams and Mercedes. But that still is considered. Ollie Behrman is kind of being groomed at Haas to become the a driver for Ferrari, hopefully, right? But I think that Yuki going to Haas and taking that side step to go upwards could be stifled if he gets caught up in the same shuffle where he's not taken seriously. I think Ferrari might take him even less seriously than Red Bull at this point. And that could be because of just how he presented himself within the first few years of his career. And even though he's trying to distance himself from that and become better, I just think with the combination of Drive to Survive and the public scrutiny that he got, and kind of just how he presents himself, I think that's going to be a big limiting factor, which is a shame to say because, again, this is my opinion, but it's a shame to say that because his on track performance has been, week over week expanding month over month, becoming a lot better, and you can see that trajectory, right? So I think maybe he shot himself in the foot in ways that he are irreparable and hard to take back. But damn it, if I'd say that he wasn't really impressing me this year. And I think landing at somewhere like Aston Martin, they would be lucky to have him. He'd be lucky to be there, working alongside Fernando Alonso. That seems like it would be the best spot for him, and it's not considered like a feeder team, right? It fits a lot of what you just said, Chris. It fits the bill for him in terms of at any point this team could vie for the P2, P3 position on podium, right? This team could potentially try to get a constructors cup, across the whole team. Maybe he's
Right.
not the guy to go get himself a chip, because I just don't think there's a very few amount of guys that I think that can do that, win a chip for themselves, but they can contribute to a team winning a championship. And I think the Aston Martin has all the right fixings and the foundation and the resources to be able to do that. But dad's love is really hard to overcome, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add to this is that I think Yuki and as well as a bunch of other drivers need to be careful because I feel like this silly season is very close to turning into an episode of musical chairs where everyone's sort of trying to play the game, wait and see what's happening, and then one moment the music's going to stop and there's going to be a couple drivers without a seat and they might not even see it coming or not know it. So I think these drivers need to be careful because if an Ollie Behrman comes in, if a Kimi Antonelli comes in, that's already two drivers on the current grid that are out. And if Lance doesn't leave, that's even less seats that are available to people. We might lose a couple people just from them trying to play the game or, thinking that they have more, marketability. I read a rumor out there that Checo has been offered a deal at Red Bull, but he wants a longer deal. So, you know, that could be a position where they're like, fuck it, we'll sign. So we'll see what happens. But these drivers need to be a little bit careful thinking, that they can get anything that they want. Sometimes that's not going to always be the case. So it'll be really interesting to see where Yuki ends up. I think he's a good driver. I think he's got talent, and he obviously has the weight on his side. It's important.
Mhm.
I think Pierre Gasly was like, you put every F1 driver in a stock go kart, and Yuki wins hands down just because he's so smaller than everybody else. So, um, yeah, you know he's been performing, and Danny had that one weekend of brilliance where all of a sudden we were like, holy shit, this is the Danny Rick. But then, similar to his time at McLaren, he kind of went backwards again. So
Yeah.
I wonder actually how he feels about McLaren's recent success, and just like, kind of making the wrong move at the right time as often as possible. So
I mean, I feel like the way that he was struggling at McLaren, bro, he even if he stayed there, they would have like asked him to leave.
yeah, probably. I mean, they
Yeah,
did. They did. They
I
asked.
think his best stroke was at Renault with what's his face, the French guy. I forgot his name.
I
The
know
the
you're
team
talking about.
principal. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I thought that was the best performance that he had since he was at Red Bull. He had that one win at McLaren, which I think is a fluke. But again, remember what I said earlier: the grid's getting much more competitive, and I don't know if this is the case much earlier in F1. Every time I try to like go watch like historic races and stuff, it like the same people always kind of stick out, like your Schumacher, your Senna, your Nicky Laudas, like those are the guys that their name always circulate, but there's multiple people on that grid, and I just their names like are so obscure. So maybe this is a trend that's happened before, where a lot of superstars come in to race in any given time, but it's not. It seems to me that like the grid's pretty stacked with a couple of outliers. I think Danny is now one of those outliers. So yeah, I don't know. I think, but there's also the K mag of it all, right? Reckless and kind of vicious. I think that's more of an old school way of driving nowadays. I think like now drivers do have to be more cognizant, and I think if more rule change comes that are bigger, like punitive measures against what Kevin did, then it'll take those kinds of drivers off the grid as well.
Right.
So I think you have to be really like strategic driver that can communicate very well with you have to literally, this is going to sound so lame, dude, you have to literally be a part of the formula as a whole, right? The formula can't just stop with the car and the engineers. Like the driver has to become like not just a focal point but like a part of the machine essentially. So I think that happens with drivers that are very responsive. I don't know if I also don't know what kind of feedback Yuki gives, right, to his engineers. I don't know if it's to the detailed level that maybe Alonso or even someone like Hulk gives to their teams, but I'd be curious to see what Yuki's like behind the scenes when it comes to debriefs and like doing like post race meetings. So yeah, let's talk about a couple of things. I know you had a couple of miscellaneous things you wanted to point out, Chris. It looks like the McLaren livery is on that list. I love to start there. It looks badass. I really think it looks badass. I wish they had it at Imola to commemorate Senna, but whatever.
Yeah, I
What about
mean,
Monaco?
yeah, maybe it was about a taste thing, just because unfortunately that's where Senna had his crash. But it's you know I just want these teams to do these liveries more often. Like, I get the paint thing, whatever, and sponsors, et cetera, et cetera. But you know these liveries, they look so cool.
Imagine how bleak it would have been if they were like, "This is our tribute to Ayrton," and it was a completely black car. It was like a hearse.
Yeah, just like we took off all the paint. No, but
Yeah,
yeah, like these cars look cool. Like, you know, Red Bull teased the Japanese white hat, and I was like, oh god, they're bringing back the best livery of all time. I can't wait. And then they didn't, and I just kind of wish that these teams would do that more often. It looks really nice, and it gives the grid something differentiate. They could sell more merch off of it. So I think it looks really cool, and I just wish we could see more stuff like that. And you know,
yeah. Did you see Vettel's kind of? tribute to
Yeah,
Ayrton. I thought that was really badass.
yeah.
The perfect guy to do it too.
No, they had a photo op where the whole grid was wearing Senna shirts, and Max Verstappen had his shirt stolen, so he's like the only person in the photo in a Red Bull gear.
That's funny.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like I love it when the sport come together like that. Um, and so yeah, would love to see more liveries, but the rumors are out there. We already talked about Valtteri going to Williams and Yuki may be interested in Haas. But the one of the guys at Alpine said Mick Schumacher is a possibility for that seat. And everyone was like, Mick, like, is Gasly and Ocon not doing a good job? But there's rumors that, one or both of them want to leave as well. Obviously, the team has been struggling. So I'm curious what you thought. Like, what happens if one of those leave? Where do they go? Like this is what I'm talking about, the musical chairs. I just
I mean, it could be a. I think they stay.
I mean I
I,
think they have to.
I think they stay by force majeure, dude. Like I don't think because let's play it out. So if Gasly has to go up against Bottas for the Williams seat, I think Bottas is going to get that seat because of how well they've worked together in the past, and he can provide that veteran level of feedback for the car to perform better. And he has like that, that intimate relationship with like Williams and how their operation goes. So I think that's a losing battle for Gasly. Can Gasly go to Haas? No, because those are two taken. Can Gasly go to Aston Martin? I don't think it's. I just don't see that fit. I don't think there's enough there for him to overtake Lance. Can Gasly go to VCarb? Nope. I mean, why revisit somewhere that you've already fallen off on, or you've kind of left in a haphazard way? Um, Let me see if there's any other openings. I mean, Kick. You think he's gonna? That's a downgrade in a way, right? And Audi already has
Hulk.
Hulk, and I
Yeah.
think they're gonna probably be taking on Signs. I think that's gonna be the most because I just don't think Red Bull is gonna extend the deal to Signs. I think they're gonna play it by keeping Checo, unless Checo just completely flops this year. Um, I I think Carlos is gonna go to Audi. Can Yeah, dude, I don't see Pierre competitively going to any of these teams other than staying at Alpine, and even less so for Esteban. He had a decent enough race. Is there a universe where he could go and be the stopgap at Mercedes? Maybe.
Yeah, he keeps talking about
Sure.
it. He keeps saying like I'm a Mercedes junior. Like I think he wants
Yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah, but
saying.
he's also the guy that just like every time like he has like someone asks him about to comment on another driver, he'll like somehow insert himself into that comment. He's a little shameless in that front. I don't think he has the intangibles to really take a team anywhere. I think Pierre and him are just really good drivers, and like that's more than you can ever say for me and you.
Right.
But like they're not comparing it to me and you. They're comparing it to drivers on standby, drivers that are currently like competing, right? Like I just don't see where either of those guys would go because even the bottom of the pack is kind. I mean, maybe if if Carlos decides to sign with Red Bull or plans change, right? Checo's gonna want to go somewhere then,
That's true.
and I don't think either of those guys are better than neither of those guys are better than Checo. And so what then you got to consider, Logan Sarge. Sorry, not Logan. Sorry, not Logan Sargent at all. Liam Lawson.
Yeah.
Liam Lawson is going to be needed somewhere, right? I think Danny Rick is going to lose that V carb seat. I think Liam Lawson is going to slot in there. If they're smart, they'd keep Liam Lawson happy. Ollie Behrman is going to be going to Haas, and then and Kimi Antonelli, he's the actual Mercedes driver, that they're gonna try to want to get in there. Uh, I don't think. I'm sorry. Sorry, it took so long to answer that
Oh, you're
question, but
good.
yeah, I don't think Gasly and Esteban are going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting if one of them actually just gets the boot, but it's hard to see like anybody choosing Mick Schumacher over either of those two just from a, you know, those two drivers are better than Mick, hands down. So,
Yeah, I think mixed time. I think like he should just stick with. And I've talked about this before. I think he should stick with the plan to go join IndyCar if they'll have him. Like I think that'll be a cool place to kind of build his own legacy. If he's pretty good, why not?
yeah, and then just to retouch, if Valtteri does end up going to Williams, maybe it'll be the first instance where we get a team principal being an engineer at the same time, be like, Valtteri, it's James.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like there's a lot of meat on that bone.
Yeah.
And I think Valtteri is at that place where he just drove for kicks for a year. He's riding around his bicycle. He's not anticipating. He's not anticipating like walking into a winning team. You take what you could get, and he's kind of like in the sunset of his career. He had a great career compared to other drivers. He's probably in the top 10 percentile, like even probably the top 5 percentile of all drivers that's ever been on the grid. And so that, like, he's proven his. I think now is a chance for him to go ride into the sun in a really graceful way and kind of do it at a place that would treat him with respect. He'd be with a really great driver. What a great driver pairing that would be for Williams. Like I think that would be a really great place for a healthy place for them to start. Not this volatile shit where James has to like keep his mouth closed and stone faced and say that he's it would be working against I think James Val's like character to say anything against Logan, and I respect the shit out of him for that. Like I think really great coaches and really great managers have that kind of virtuous aspect to them, but man, it's a results driven sport, and there's such few opportunities to shine, and I think Valtteri would be a great way for them to right ship the course. They have a lot of problems going on. So we'll talk about, I'm definitely going to bring up Williams again before we end this call. But
I mean,
yeah, those are my thoughts. I think Mick Schumacher should go to Indy. I think Valtteri should go to Williams.
yeah, I mean, Valtteri had a what appeared to be like a 30-second to 1 minute, meeting in the Williams garage while they were at Imola. And the way I imagine that going down is Valtteri walking in, sitting down. There's a cup of coffee. They both take a sip, and James is like, "Sign here, Valtteri," and they sign. He's like, "What's that about?" He's like, "Well, see you next year. Bye." Like, it's like,
He's like, all right, that's
okay,
cool
yeah,
with me.
whatever. Cool. See ya.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think those kinds of situations though, bro, are going to be fewer and far between as we progress over the next couple of years, and like these like other three guys come in, and if they live up to expectations and not the whole De Vries debacle, like I think these situations that Valtteri is in are going to be very few and far between.
I completely agree. I think these times are running out, and once we get to the new regs, everyone's going to want to have the future of their team in place. So we'll probably lose a lot of these legacy guys who don't have promise for championships. But
Yeah,
in the
we'll lose
last,
the Vlade Divacs of the grid, and
yep.
and if you're an NBA fan, you'll know what the hell I'm talking about.
And the last thing I'll just bring up is like I'm going to tip my hat off to Andretti just because he's trying so hard to get into this sport. They just hired the chief technical officer Pat Simmons from F1
You know what I think he should do? I think he should go broker a deal with the Saudis and open up their own F1 everything.
F-Zero,
Like,
baby.
yeah, F 0.5. Uh, and just do what Live Golf did to have their own thing outside of the PGA.
Yeah, man, they could
I,
they could pay Sebastian Vettel 100 million to take
to
on
to go out to, yeah. I
live
mean, yeah.
live
It's
racing.
a it's definitely a live racing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be funny as fuck. But I like where Andretti's like gumption is. It shows you that if you're so rich, you can do things like this.
I wish I
You
had
can
that
put your
in my
son into an F1 car, even though he fucking sucks, and
well,
look at him in the face and tell him you love him. You can go build an entire team, even though you're not. He's Chris. He has hired human beings and is on. They're on payroll for a company that does nothing.
yeah, I don't want to go into this actually. I watched like a half an hour video today about the whole Lance Stroll thing. So apparently he did an interview where they were talking, I think, about the Kimi Antonelli super license thing, and they were talking about like why is it so difficult? And fucking Lance Stroll looked at the camera and said, "Yeah, well, the super license is there to like prevent people from like buying their way into the sport and having drivers be there that shouldn't be there." And everyone was like, "Are you saying this?" And then this guy literally did a 30-minute breakdown about everything his father's done, everything that they've done to like buy him into the sport. And then he went as far back as his like early karting days, F3, F2. And that guy has been causing crashes and accidents and doing stupid things in the sport since as far as you can remember. Anyways, crazy thing is, yeah,
Yeah,
like,
I
but
guess tone deaf comes with being that stupidly rich.
But yeah, Andretti should absolutely go do that. You know, if Papa Stroll can do it, just buy your own team, build your own sport. You know, get in there,
Yeah, get in there,
get
dude.
in there. Oh,
But all right,
let's talk about winners losers.
let's get in there.
Yeah, who you got for your
Who
win?
you got? All right. Well, we both got Norris,
Yeah, of
so I'm
course.
gonna let you. I'm gonna let you talk a little bit more about Norris because I'm not. I'm still not. I'm still a hater. I put Logan Sargent and Lance Stroll as winners, and I'll tell you why. Logan Sargent.
You're breaking up. I can't hear you. Did you say Logan Sargent and Lance Stroll?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay, okay.
yeah, yeah. You heard that right, listeners. Logan Sargent, because you'll never hear it again.
Yeah.
His time is almost up. He made it into P17. The only people behind him were an Alex Albon that retired, a Fernando Alonso who started in the pits, and a Valtteri Bottas who could care less. So, good job, Logan.
Yeah.
He finished. And that's all we could have asked from him. All right. Lance Stroll finished P9.
Got a point.
Can't knock that. He had a couple of little overtakes. I guess every now and again he does, show up. He qualified P13 and brought up to P9, got some points, and that's my ceiling for him. So yeah, way to go, Lance Stroll and Logan Sargent. Every now and again, a comet does strike,
Great,
and
greatness.
their comet is very lackluster.
Yeah, every now and then their greatness shines through. I mean, we talked about Lance Stroll to ad nauseum. Like, obviously, the guy probably doesn't belong on the grid, but occasionally he has a good race.
He'll break a wrist and then do a thing.
As long as no one's going into an apex with him at the same time, he could finish the race.
Yeah.
But
All right. Who do you got for winners this week?
yeah, I mean, like obviously Lando, he got his first win last week. Arguably, we just talked about he probably could have had that back in Monza a couple years ago in 2021, and then there's in Sochi as well. But he's clearly on another level right now. He's clearly taking the car to its maximum and able to perform. And so, hats off to Lando for being able to keep his cool. And listen, he was charging down Max for the last 10 laps. And if he had had 2 or 3 more laps, it would have been over. He would have probably caught him. He had a couple very slight adjustments. Probably lost a tenth or two that kept him out of DRS range a little bit too long. But ultimately, he had what it took to win. The talent there, the car is there. I think it's going to be a matter of time before he wins another race this year, as long as everything stays status quo. I mean, they have a very, very good chance in Singapore, where Red Bull really struggled last year, and then even next week at Monaco, the qualifying was so close between the top three. And if you qualify P1 in Monaco, if you have that magic lap, it's going to be very hard for even someone like Max to overtake. So it's very possible that we could see that Senna McLaren on the top step next week from either driver. Who's my other winner is Piastri. you know, Oscar outqualified Lando, and he only, he got the grid penalty from impeding in quali. And, I wasn't going to put him in my loser column, but I was really sad for Oscar just because I think there's a world where Oscar could have won this race. I think there was DRS gets activated now on lap 2 instead of lap 3. And so it was one of those things where you never know. Like Lando was so close for the first couple laps. There was chances of him getting DRS and being able to take it to Max. And I think there was a chance Oscar could have done that. And maybe Oscar wins that race. But they both have, now that Oscar has all the upgrades, I think we're going to see a competition between the two papayas and Max. Unfortunately, Checo is nowhere to be seen. But I think it's going to be really interesting. So hats off to Zach and Oscar and Lando, and I think we're going to see them on the podium a lot more often.
Yeah, and the last couple of laps is where this race really shined. And in lap 54, Lando was less than 5 seconds behind Verstappen. I think that's where he really started applying the pressure. Verstappen did report having low battery issues, so he wasn't able to push it as much as he would have liked to probably, and optimize that car speed in the last couple of laps. But maybe that's also due to the fact that he's being pushed so hard in the front. Norris is really fighting with that car at lap 58. He almost even goes off track.
Right.
It made me kind of, have to pause and rewatch that part again, just because imagine how tragic it would have been if he did go off track.
Just ask
Um,
George Russell.
yeah, I know. No, no, no. I know what that feels like from a fan perspective.
Yeah.
And then by lap 63, he pulls into 0.75, 0.76 seconds of Verstappen, and it just shows that the car has a lot of. I think straight line speed, but also slow corner speeds, right? Was really Mercedes thorn and Mercedes side, and that's going to be incredibly important going into maybe not Monaco, but places like Azerbaijan and some of the more like straight line tracks. That's probably going to be really important for them to have that in their back pocket. Yeah, Norris, I'll give it to him. I'll give him I'll give him his flowers. He's definitely trending ahead of the curve from my data points from my last call, the ones that I call hater data points, hater points.
Hater point.
Yeah, so he's really trending above that curve, that trend line. So maybe he'll get his win too in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, I agree with you. I think Oscar, given that he was also provided all the upgrades that Lando was, probably has a win coming soon for him. I wouldn't be surprised. Let's talk about our losers. I'll let you start, Chris. Who you got for your losers?
Yeah, I mean, like my big one is Sergio. Missing out on Q3, starting P11, and then I get Imola is a difficult track to overtake on, but you're in a Red Bull, you're in a rocket ship, and you can't even outperform the two Mercedes who basically are in a tractor at the moment and not really knowing, steps forward, and then I just like we. You, I mean, Sergio's had a lot of problems in the last year or two with, being either overly aggressive at times or not aggressive enough, and I think he struggles when he has to like not be in front. I think that's why he dive bombed in Mexico because he just needed that lead to try to win the race. But I just think he struggles overtaking and taking those risks like some of these other younger drivers can do. And so, and this year is the year that he really needs to outshine his competition and consistently finish in the top three to maintain his seat. Because if he starts missing Q3s over and over and finishes out of the points, there could be that talk about signing signs. So I think this was a bad performance for him. Like obviously he kept it on track and he finished, but I think this is a low bar for him. He needs to do a little bit better to keep his seat at Red Bull, most likely.
Yeah, I have Checo in my loser circle today as well. By the time it's lap 27, it's not even halfway through the race. He's just letting Leclerc and others kind of pass by him without much of a fight for a P5 position that I thought he should have fought for really heavily. By lap 36, he gets into a duel with Hamilton. I think he's kind of pulling his elbows out to I think the PTSD from years past kind of had him chin up a little bit, especially when Hamilton came through. But by lap 37, Hamilton passes him too for P7.
Yep.
So I guess Perez in a way led the middle of the pack, which is completely unacceptable for a Red Bull driver. I think this actually puts into question uh, his ability to get the car to do what he wants to do, especially when Max was having a tough time to this week doing the same thing. Right? I think there's a point where Max is going into the pits and he locks up in there. Going into the pits. So if Max is having a hard time with it and he's kind of just eking out that P1, and Perez is clearly behind the Ferraris, the McLarens, and the Mercedes, that's a big identifier of what to expect if Red Bull does need him to step up. Chances are he's probably not going to be able to. Another couple of drivers I have on my losers list. Alex Albon, really tough race. Just kind of the illustration of Williams' season, to date this year. Uh, I think that unsafe release that he got penalized 10 seconds for is totally on his pit crew for not putting on that front right tire properly. And, by lap 60, he had to retire. So tough week for him. Alonso started in the pits. Tough week for him. Don't have a whole lot to say other than the fact that he let Lance beat him by a lot. I also threw Hulkenberg in there. I thought Hulk was having a really good race. I thought he was going to come into points, and just by virtue of Yuki's last second kind of finesse, he was able to beat out Nico. But he did stay ahead of Kevin Magnussen. Just couldn't get any points. It would have been really great to see Nico get some points this week. So I put him in my losers column, but only because I want to see him get out of it quickly. Hot seat. I'll start this one, Chris. I have Williams as a whole in my hot seat. I think we talked at length about what they should do, what we think would be a good move for them to make. Obviously we are just sideline kind of spectators, so we don't know anything. But I think that another year of this is you're gonna essentially tell your investors, hey, take your money elsewhere. I think that's what you're going to indicate to your investors, and I just don't think they can make it to next season without having to have some drastic changes.
Right.
Any expanding thoughts on Williams, or do you have someone that you want to talk about in your hot seat?
No, I mean we've already kind of talked ad nauseum about Williams, and on my hot seat as well. We've sort of beat this horse. So it's Mercedes. They need to nail their upcoming decisions, not only on their technical side, but on their driver's side. And I think my wife had asked me, how did Mercedes do, and I was like, I actually don't remember. Like, they haven't been performing. They haven't been at the top. They haven't been getting a lot of broadcast time for those reasons, and I think they just need to make a lot of changes. So you know, both both
Yeah, George Russell got fastest lap though of the race, which was nice.
congrats, George Russell.
Yeah, wish that showed up in qualifying. But yeah, I don't disagree, man. I think Lewis, even though no one will admit it, he's definitely not going to admit it. I think he's checked out, right? I think over the course of last season and this season, just kind of the exasperated tone he takes with his team on the radio probably says a lot more than what we'd like to believe. I think it's just a natural thing for an athlete, for any human to no, Chris, like, let's say you're starting a new job, right? Like, are you going to really pay attention to a whole lot about what you're doing with this job, even though you're given a 2 weeks like notice? Like, you're probably going to just go on autopilot and like just focus on how do you set yourself up for success in the next role.
I mean, I'm pretty sure
Uh,
Lewis showed up the last race
In
wearing
red.
a Ferrari outfit. Like he's already
Yeah.
thinking about the future, daydreaming about his next job. It's
Yeah.
such an interesting sport. No, like you know you're done with your team a year in advance. It's so weird. Like I don't know. It's got to be weird to be a lot of different drivers, a lot of different people. Like even Adrian Newey, like he. I mean, I guess that's why he's not on the F1 team anymore. But it's what are you doing at that for a year? I don't know. It's just an interesting phenomenon that is unique, I think, to F1 in a lot of ways.
I recently just finished Newey's book, How to Build a Car.
Is it good?
I highly suggest it for anyone. He's kind of like the Anthony Bourdain in a way of like aero design, and he's actually kind of a badass, and he has been divorced multiple times in his life, which kind of signifies that he prioritizes certain things above others in his
He's
life.
also never
And
home. None of these people are, but yeah.
yeah, he's always traveling. But definitely, if you have a chance to audio book his book or buy it and actually read it, it's fascinating stuff. I think he
No,
really puts into perspective what that caliber of success and being that smart at math does for someone over a course of uh, the last 30 years. Man, he's been in it since before I was born. So
that's crazy.
yeah. So to you, Chris, and to anyone that's listening out there, definitely suggest giving his book a go. But that's all I got this week, Chris. I think it was boring-ish for the most part on the front end, and then at the last couple of laps, it really picked up, and I think it was well worth watching the entire race to get to that point. In two, I think is it next week or in 2 weeks?
This weekend, yeah, we got
okay, cool, yeah. So this upcoming weekend,
Monaco.
Really, is it this weekend?
It's Monaco this weekend.
Oh, it is. I'm so sorry. I was looking at the wrong dates on my calendar. Yeah, you're right. It's this weekend, Monaco. I don't think there's a sprint. So we'll be here. What is it? It's going to be on Sunday at 8 a.m. Central. I don't know what that translates to in European time, but we'll be watching it. We'll be back potentially on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still mad from Alonso not putting those inters on last year because I think he could have won that race, and I think he should have won that race.
Yeah, leave the past in the past, Chris.
But it is what it is. But I'm excited. Monaco is one of my favorite races. I definitely want to go. Obviously, quality is a little bit more important, but you never know what happens. Maybe get a little sprinkle, a little rain, shake things up. And Monaco is just one of those iconic, historic races that everyone needs to watch and go to, and is part of the Triple Crown. So, Max is obviously favorite, but maybe we'll get a papaya Monaco winner this year with a special victory to boot.
Yeah, it would be something to see. I'm hoping that papaya is going to end up being Oscar Piastri though. So, yeah, that's it for this week. We will see you guys after the Monaco Grand Prix. Until then, peace out, everybody.
See ya. Thank you for listening. Shayem and I would love for you to join the Fan Team Radio community. So please like, subscribe, or follow on your platform of choice, and we'll see you next time.